about to listen to the Dr. Dahlia Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Dahlia Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Dahlia.
Well, I want to hate it. I want to just rag on AI and complain about the jobs it's going to take over, and it's going to, definitely replace doctors like me. All right. And I want to rip it to pieces. But then also, I have to be very grateful for some of the work it's doing. But in the short term, I think it might be a good thing. In the long term, we could be in trouble. So the latest study has found, and these headlines really drive doctors like me crazy, where AI helped diagnose 18 kids whose rare illnesses stumped doctors. This is being reported by The Independent. So that is suggesting that we medical professionals who had years of training saw tens to not hundreds of thousands of patients in our career, couldn't figure out what the hell was going on and needed a computer to do it. That's, I got to tell you, that's one way to make us extinct. But at least 18 kids got diagnoses correctly, and so I have to credit AI for that. So what happened was, this was a study in the New England Journal of Medicine's New England Journal of Medicine AI. So now AI even has its own journal, subjournal. I mean, look, AI gets to be published. I mean, I've been published, but AI gets its own now journal. New England Journal of Medicine's AI. And apparently OpenAI's O3 model helped find answers to, quote, mysteries in the medical field. This AI model was released in April 2025, and it helped identify new diagnoses for patients at Boston's Children's Hospital, including 10 with rare neurodevelopmental diseases, 4 with neuromuscular disorders, 2 who had died suddenly, and 2 with early psychosis. One of the study's lead researchers, according to The Independent, Catherine Brownstein, from the Manton Center for Orphan Disease Research at Boston's Children's, said it's a total game changer. She told NBC News. And they are this Manton Center is trying to understand the cause of rare diseases, which affect 30 million people in the United States. So they explained that what the hospital does is screens the genomes, or the genetic makeup of patients affected by rare diseases, look at their complete set of DNA against newly identified genes in the hopes of a diagnosis. Finding a rare disease diagnosis can be very time consuming, but I guess a machine could do it lickety split. So they feel that because a researcher can only spend so much time on a single case, now you have AI helping speed things along. Researchers analyzed 376 genomes from undiagnosed patients with rare diseases, and the AI model identified nearly 5% of new diagnoses. So according to Dr. Browerstein, considering how many times these had already been analyzed, it's a huge number and means one answer, and each one means an answer for the family. All right, so there was a 9-year-old girl who I guess was walking on her tiptoes and had difficulty running with a normal gait. So doctors couldn't figure out what the root cause was. She ends up turning 20 years old last year. So this all started when she was 9, and researchers finally diagnosed her with myofibrillar myopathy, which is a progressive genetic neuromuscular disorder. Now, this is a huge advantage for AI to figure it out. My question is the reason why we have specialists. Now, I'm a family doctor. So as a family doctor, I need to be able to manage everything from your eyelash to your toenail, from your scalp to your urethra. I need to be able to identify what's going on, at least understand what realm we're in, manage most illnesses, but if something starts to get beyond my scope, send you to a specialist who has dedicated their career to just that part. So like urologists dedicate their careers to your kidney, prostate, penis, bladder, your neurologists dedicate their careers to seizures or to concussion or to neurodegenerative disorders. And now there's even subspecialties. You have migraine neurospecialists. You have muscular dystrophy neurospecialists. So people become specialists in that field. And so we assume that we have enough doctors in these fields where you'd send them to the right specialist, they pick up on it. That's how our safety net's been working. That's, and unfortunately, if you don't have enough people wanting to go into a specialty, we might not have enough providers. So AI being that safety net and picking things up, that's great. But eventually AI is not going to need then me. I mean, what I do is too easy for a computer. Somebody comes in saying, I have chest pain. All right. My job is to deduce if it's cardiac, if it's pulmonary, if it's GI, if it's musculoskeletal, neurological. Why are they having the chest pain? Psychiatric. And I could do that pretty easily because I've had years of training. AI could do that very quickly. So I'm probably going to be out of a job. So anybody hiring? Well, not yet. It's going to happen soon. And somebody could say, but Dr. Dahlia, don't you examine patients? I did when I had my office, but now that patients want telemedicine, they're not getting examined like they should. I think everybody should have a physical exam at least once a year. Skin cancer checks, if you're high risk, multiple times a year. Asthma evaluations, but the average patient isn't going to the doctor anymore. So it's just a very simple step for them to eventually say, let's just let the computer figure it out, especially when these studies are saying that computers are doing better than humans. Now, one thing I do have to say, being devil's advocate, is for years, I would tell patients who were having medical issues that a specialist or I couldn't figure out. It just didn't fit anything textbook. And I would say, you might have a syndrome that hasn't been named yet. Just because we have 2,000 diagnoses, let's say, even though we have more than that, all right, hypothetically, doesn't mean those are the only diagnoses that exist. We might figure out what you have in 2035. Well, nobody wants to wait till 2035 for that new syndrome or diagnosis to come out. So we are going to need AI if we doctors aren't, doing what needs to be done. The 1-877 Doc Dolly, don't go away.
Have you ever thought you'd like to buy and sell houses but didn't know how or where to get the money? My name is Ron LeGrand, and over the past 40 years, I've bought over 3,000 houses without using my money or credit and taught thousands to do the same. Today, even in a virtual environment, we buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods using no banks, realtors, contractors, or other costly entanglements, and build huge cash flow and wealth without the hassle of tenants, all without credit and little or no money. You don't need a license or experience, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Text FREE to 99799, and I'll send you my free training. I promise you I'll change the way you think about real estate and open the door to a new lifestyle that doesn't involve risk or rehabs and can quickly replace your current income. Text FREE to 99799 and let me show you how to take your life back and build cash flow and wealth from your home. That's FREE to 99799. Again, FREE to 99799.
Hi, it's Mark Falter, host of the Financial Fitness Show. I strongly believe that no one should ever pay 1 penny more in taxes than they are legally obligated. Unfortunately, for most hardworking Americans, this just isn't the case. Why? Because most people spend more time planning next weekend's getaway than trying to ensure they're going to pay less in taxes. My financial fitness team has put together some materials that I know are going to help you. It's the Tax Savings Kit. Tax Savings Kit includes 3 things: free tax analysis, top 10 ways to pay less in taxes, and an investor's guide to taxes. Now, how do you get it? Simple. 866-764-2635. Again, 866-764-2635. I'm Mark Falter. This is Financial Fitness, making personal finance profitable.
We're back on the Dr. Dahlia Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Dahlia, 1-877 DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to y'all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Dahlia, Facebook, The Dr. Dahlia Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So you all know I'm a Tom Brady fan. Even though I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, anytime Tom Brady played, I had to try to watch a game. Although with all the paywalls and the streaming, I didn't get to see every single game of his. But he was fun to watch, and he's the GOAT. And he's been interviewed about his attitude towards what's been going on with football. And in fact, he's actually been criticizing how the weenification, becoming more weenie-ish, football is becoming, as the NFL is trying to protect against CTE. CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy we see in individuals who get repeated head trauma, either from beatings, from sports, from other injuries. And unfortunately, we don't diagnose CTE until after post-mortem, where we could take a sample of the brain and we look at the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or the changes to the brain from chronic trauma. Aaron Hernandez, I believe, of the Patriots, he was a Patriots tight end, who was, I believe, convicted of murder, had been on his postmortem found to have severe CTE. I always thought O.J. Simpson, maybe that's why there was that volatility and the alleged murder of his ex-wife and Ron Goldman. Nicole Brown Simpson, because maybe his football careers, with the Bills, the Bulls, possibly could have affected his brain. And Tom Brady has had a lot of concussions. People think that maybe that's why Giselle, or Gazelle, how to pronounce her name, divorced him. I don't really know. I mean, all I know is if I was married to somebody who wouldn't allow me to have carbs in the house, that would be pretty difficult. Even if it was Tom Brady. And I also don't know if he walked around shirtless. I remember there was a little bit of a video of him shirtless in his underwear. I wouldn't have left, but yeah, she wanted to leave. That's, to each your own. I blame the carbs. But, people have wondered, is it because Tom Brady has early CTE? Well, he actually spoke about this. And, looking at the NFL now implementing, position-specific helmets and guardian caps, they say, and assessing targeting and all these unnecessary roughness and roughing the passer calls, the NFL has tried to work to protect their players. But Tom Brady, as well as a lot of other individuals, are kind of looking at football as, well, it's ruining the game. I'm mixed on that because I can't stand watching Pro Bowl. In fact, that's why they changed the Pro Bowl to now these little like field day type exercises and competitions between the players, because Pro Bowl sucked. It was boring to watch, and it wasn't football. People want to watch a fight. People want to watch a tackle. People want to watch, and I mean, we don't want to necessarily see people get hurt. But, this is our way as humans to project our aggression so we don't get into fights, and if we have trouble playing on the field, we get to see our team beat other people up. But it's not safe. And as a doctor, I have to say, I need to side on caution. I need to side on protecting individuals. Well, Tom Brady says that he says people are being really conscious about head injuries. This is I think he was on the Overlap. Being interviewed. And he said, it's not my favorite thing to talk about. Part of what you sign up for as an athlete is that you're willing to take more risks than what other people are willing to take. Nobody wants to see people get injured, but I think we should actually get better at taking care of people. Why don't we focus our attention, he says, on how to get people recovered better? Why are we still archaic about that, but change the rules to lessen the contact? Contact is a big part of the game. He said, and there is still a lot of contact in the sport, but we've lessened it by about 25 to 30%. So, here's the only problem with chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I had suggested that every time there's a head injury, let's give oxygen. We should be, and maybe have these patients on CPAP to try to get more air and oxygen to the brain. to help it heal. The problem is once you have a brain injury, you can't take that back. It's not like, I'm going to eat a steak and then what I'll do is take some cholesterol medicine so I don't get the high cholesterol. There's more to that eating a steak, and just popping an extra cholesterol statin pill, isn't necessarily going to, fix the ramifications. But when you're now looking also at like a brain injury, I have to disagree. As much as I hate to disagree with Tom Brady because he's so hot, you don't want the injury. So I'm kind of surprised he said that. And I know why he said it, because football is starting to suck. So I get that. Oh my God, the last Super Bowl was so boring. I mean, it's football is, I mean, look at the NBA. I mean, wow. It's interesting. I like to watch old football games. They're on. And I haven't watched any old football games because what happened with the Knicks and, watching the Spurs and the Thunder hammer it out and all that. I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, that was some pretty exciting stuff. You don't really, and then hockey, oh my gosh. And in hockey, the refs will just let them beat each other up. In fact, one of my favorite things to watch are these videos on YouTube where the goalies go after each other. The goalies have had no interaction the whole entire game. And a fight breaks out, and you see the goalies start tearing off their gear and decide to go after each other in a fight. I mean, they had no contact. Nobody said anything to them. And then they decide to, on opposite sides of the rink, just to go and I think that's kind of funny. So just kind of a hobby of mine. But back to Tom Brady being as sexy as he is. Besides him being sexy, oh yeah. So I have to disagree where you don't want the injury. Any of us that have ever had a knee injury or ankle injury, once you injure it, it's not the same. It's not the same. So what do we do? We keep asking ourselves this question. What do we do? I mean, my son played football. My boys have played soccer and baseball and swam but when it came to football, I got a little scared. My father played soccer. And, he kind of had a volatile, and I don't know if it's just, men, in the previous generations were more like this, or maybe he had CTE. I think my grandfather had CTE. I remember seeing his eyes roll, and he would get really, really mad, and he had a very short fuse. And my mom said, well, it's because he's always in pain. But he played football when they didn't have helmets, a leatherhead. He didn't, and so you start to wonder how much CTE he had. Nobody did a postmortem because he died in the 80s. And so the erratic behavior, the moodiness, the testiness. Now, mind you, I mean, the average person does get more testy. I mean, I've had a couple concussions, but I just blame my testiness on, people just ticking me, people being stupid. I mean, I blame them as opposed to that. But we have a lot of parents out there who want their kids to later be drafted to the NFL. Or to become the next Fernando Mendoza, I don't blame these parents. On the other end, they want their kids safe. And how do you keep your kids safe in one of the most exciting, violent contact sports that exist? I mean, you are having 300-pound men coming at your kid. And they're going to fall and they're going to hit their head. And the helmets, I do agree with making helmets and gear safer. And I think whoever is engineering them, we don't want to see cervical injuries. We don't want to see paralysis. I mean, when you see these decorticate posturing, when these players fall and then they, I'm trying to think of some of the it's the players who we've seen over the years do that. I mean, that's some dangerous stuff. We don't want to see anybody die. But NFL is huge, and they are not going to, turn to flag football. In fact, flag football got canceled. When I was a little kid, I remember in grade school, I really loved flag football. I liked football. I just did. And we had flag football in the 70s that we could play in the late 70s. And apparently there was an accident where two kids ran into each other, and one kid's teeth sunk into the scalp of another kid. And the glasses broke, and that was when glasses were glass, went into the eyelid of another kid, so they had to cancel flag football. And I was like, come on, man. And another thing they had to cancel in the 70s, late 70s, was we used to on field day play tug of war. We would do tug of war. I love tug of war. And, make me the anchor. If we had no dudes, I'll do it. And I wasn't a tomboy. I just loved sports. But a bunch of kids lost their fingers in the rope. So they stopped doing tug of war. And then they brought it back with a safer rope. So we got to make football safer. But how do you do that without making the sport suck? 1-877-Doc Dolly. Don't go away.
Looking for a gift that can actually help secure someone's future? It's Mark Falter's new book, Common Sense Income Strategies. It makes the perfect gift for that special someone in your life. Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using time-tested strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. To learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Secure your future with Common Sense Income Strategies by Mark Falter. Again, to learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635.
Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Doc-A-Dolly, 1-877-DOCDALI. So, Clive Davis dies at the age of 94. We all know Clive Davis as he is a music, royalty, huge executive that was responsible for the careers of Bruce Springsteen, I believe also Janis Joplin, Carlos Santana, Whitney Houston. He has died at the age of 94. He steered Columbia, Arista, and J Records, and had over 50-year career accounting for the sales of millions of records. Apparently one of his greatest, works was helping the career of Whitney Houston. And so seeing him leave at the age of 94, not easy. Also, we're being told that Alan Greenspan has died at the age of 100. He was the Fed chief, was 2 decades at the U.S. Federal Reserve, has died at the age of 100. He chaired the Federal Reserve from 1987 until 2006. He died today from complications related to Parkinson's disease. He is survived by his wife, Andrea Mitchell, whom he married in 1997. So sadly, he passed away, and he just had been kind of an icon with Ronald Reagan and many presidents thereafter. And also in the news, Keir Starmer has left the building. Well, or I think he's on his way to leave the building. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has resigned. So Great Britain will get its 7th leader in a decade. He resigned less than 2 years after he won a landslide victory. He promised to end, chaotic policies and reverse frustration with the cost of living and the economy. And he did not, like we see with the Democratic Socialists of America. They promise and promise and promise, and then when it doesn't happen. Although in the UK, it's interesting. People think in America we're pretty tough and rough. I don't know if you've ever watched Parliament. I mean, they just yell at each other, and I mean, it's pretty. It could be. It's a blood sport, and for him to be pressured to resign, wow. I think the Labor Party's rival, Andy Burnham, is the leading candidate to replace him. On June 22nd, he apparently set out a timetable, which is today, for his departure, and he wants to usher in an orderly transfer of power. Struggling to deliver on campaign pledges is, according to USA Today, the main reason. It could also be his relationship to one of the gentlemen that he supported, who actually ended up having possible links with Jeffrey Epstein. And so we know that the British population was not very, very happy. Apparently British voters elect a party, not a specific leader. So his center-left Labour Party is going to still stay in government until the next general election. Senior members of his cabinet, did not like Starmer. They feared that he could be ruining the Labour Party. And so it's not a surprise that he probably got pushed out. So I guess nominations for a new leader would open on July 9th. And he's going to remain in his post until new prime minister is named, following an internal party sort of contest or internal party sort of race of who within his party. And so among prospective candidates are Angela Rayner and then Burnham, as we mentioned earlier. So, I don't really follow too much of the UK politics, but it's important to us because, President Donald Trump and Keir Starmer did not seem to get along. I remember, Starmer was, very, I don't want to say he was sympathetic to Hamas, but during that conflict and with the hostages, he seemed like he wanted to appease the side that was against Israel, and that's not something that is smart for anybody. Not to mention the UK has been really, really struggling with their issues of immigration and terrorist attacks, and Starmer thought that he was popular enough to insult and criticize President Trump, even though many people in Great Britain who I've spoken to think what Donald Trump stands for is what the UK should also stand for. So, I watch what happens in the UK because everybody keeps comparing healthcare to, well, the UK can do it. We could do socialized medicine. That's what the NHS is. And I watch it, and it's a horrible system. They're really struggling. Doctors and residents are always striking. They're overworked, underpaid. The residents of the UK feel they aren't getting the health care they need, months to year-long waits. I mean, the problem is now after Obamacare, America is starting to get that way where it takes months to get in with a medical provider. Well, it's because Obama said you'll be able to keep your doctor, and doctor said, to hell with this, we're not getting paid. And so I watch what happens with Great Britain because you have these Americans, the groups of them that thinking, yeah, well, we'll do it the way the UK does. And it's not, UK has a more socialist system, and you still have high cost of living. You still have high cost of things. People aren't happy. And so they also have high debt, high interest payments. Starmer, I don't think was an effective leader. And so I think him leaving, is just another sign of you can't be electing or putting people into power that promise stuff that they can't deliver. Anybody can say, all right, I'm going to improve, or I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix this. And I'm the reason why Trump got reelected is because he didn't act like a politician. He said, I'm going to, I'm going to get our gas prices down. And he did. I'm going to get egg prices down. Now things went back up, but at least he made good on the initial promise. And I'm going to secure the border. We're going to decrease fraud. We're going to, stop this waste and abuse. I worked for the government. There is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. It's about time somebody stops it. And then when, Trump did want to build the ballroom or do the UFC 250 America celebration, he didn't use taxpayer funds. In fact, when he first ran for office, he didn't use our money. He was going to use, his, he didn't ask, the average American for donations. Now, later, apparently, in order to progress in elections, you have to have a certain number of donors. That's why Bernie Sanders was like, everybody donates $7 or $11 or whatever, because he needed to show he had a large number of donors and contributors. You can't just have one or two people. So in order to progress in an election. So then later he did have to, fundraise. But, when you have these candidates, and we're seeing a lot of them now spring up in America, where they're very, media trained, and they have, and the DSA knows exactly who to find. They find individuals that they think are going to be resonating and younger and more energetic and charismatic and appeal to voters. And they say, we're going to do free health care. We're going to do free child care. We're going to do free buses. We're going to have government-run grocery stores. And we're going to free Palestine. Free Palestine from Hamas? And no, that's not what their platform is. So you can't just promise stuff and then not deliver. And the UK is, acting on it quicker than we do. 1-877-Dr.
Hi, everyone. If you've been injured in an accident and think you deserve compensation, listen up. Because we have legal professionals standing by right now to answer your questions for free. We'll help you find out if you have a case and how much it's potentially worth. If you were hurt in a car accident, truck accident, motorcycle accident, rideshare accident, slip and fall, or any other type of accident, call our 24/7 hotline now and let us help you find out how much your case is potentially worth. Call 800-978-6800. That's 800-978-6800. 800-978-6800. I'm Gina Hart, here with spokesman Jack Mercer. So, Jack, tell our listeners who should give us a call right now.
Well, Gina, first off, thank you for having me join you here in the studio. It's always great to answer the listeners' questions. Now, as far as who should call in, anyone who's been injured in an accident and think you deserve compensation, give us a call right now. The call is free, the consultation is free, and with our no-fee guarantee, you pay nothing unless we win you money.
That's great advice. Thanks, Jack. And is it true that the Legal Help Center is open 24/7?
That's right, Gina. We're open anytime you need us, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you or someone you know were injured in an accident of any kind, call now and let us help you find out if you have a case and how much it's potentially worth. Call 800-978-6800. That's 800-978-6800. 800-978-6800. Advertisement sponsored by Legal Help Center. Not available in California. May not be available in all states.
Back on the Dr. Dahlia Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. 1-877-DOCDALI. So the feds have charged 15 people with $1.4 million in fraud. And there's actually multiple fraud cases going. I can't even keep up with all the ones they're finding, and I'm glad they are. But in one of the latest, federal authorities have arrested and charged 15 people for allegedly stealing $1.4 million in SNAP, Mass Health, disability, and unemployment benefits, according to the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney's Office. The charges are a part of a string of government benefits fraud cases that the office has now started pursuing since December. Since then, they have charged more than 60 defendants in connection with $63 million in alleged fraud. They said, although federal officials said they are proud of the work that's been done in Massachusetts so far, according to Boston Herald, they argued that access to state benefits data would streamline investigations and uncover more wrongdoing. So U.S. Attorney Leah Foley said in an interview that it makes me very hopeful that we can actually make a difference. Now, again, a lot of times with these fraud cases, you need other states to not obstruct justice and allow the feds to do their work. And my concern is, when you look at, some of the individuals that could be, involved, there may be, if there is any pushback, that should already, suggest that there should be a subpoena. In fact, look at Representative Ilhan Omar. She's actually facing multiple inquiries. No, shall we say, cases brought against her yet, but she has been suspected of being tied to some of the fraud in Minnesota. And one thing that kind of, shall we say, pinged the radar was she had, when she some of her recent finances were that she had multiple millions of dollars, and then she said it was a typo, and how now they're making minimal money, and you're like, well, wait a second. So according to the New York Post, Representative Ilhan Omar and her hubby apparently the husband, I guess, once valued his venture capital and wine empire up to $30 million. Now they claim they only make about $200 a year. Really? Okay, come on. Now that has got to be pinging the radar, the BS meter. And so apparently for the latest financial disclosure report, the only money her husband made was $200. Really? They went from, hero to zero that quickly. Really? Omar claimed the total value of the couple assets for 2025 was between $20,000 and $125,000, and that their credit card and student loan debt was between $30,000 and $100,000, meaning that their net worth is at a negative $80,000 to $95,000. Does she look like she's in the red? So this is kind of confusing, because in 2024, their wealth was, I guess, close to $30 million. So this, sparked intense public scrutiny. Now, look, rich people running for office happen. But if somebody gets rich in office when their salary is $100,000 a year or $120,000 a year, that's got to make you head scratch. And I think all our politicians need to be scrutinized. Same thing even with, it's interesting. There's fraud in medicine as well. When you look at some of this Medicare, and we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the, huge medical supply company fraud that, some doctors were involved in. And I mean, like there was one Operation Never Say Die. It was a $50 million Southern California bust we talked about, where the FBI and DOJ arrested 8 people, including 3 nurses, for a massive healthcare fraud. That included hospices. They built Medicare and private insurers, and the transparency is a thing that it's a little tricky, because everybody deserves privacy. In terms of how I understand net worths are out there, although my net worth is wrong. I mean, people think I have multiple millions. I don't. All right. I think it's because they think, well, I have an education. I had a medical practice. I left that medical practice in 2016. No, that's not an asset anymore. Didn't sell it either. Didn't make any money on the practice. I left to go teach, and I gave it to another doctor to take over the patients, make sure he staffed my staff. And it was, so no assets there. But on the other end, if you see, a poor medical student, with student loans, all of a sudden become a multimillionaire in a year or two, it does start to beg the question, what's going on here? And so the rapid rise in wealth hasn't necessarily been a red flag, because you have some of these influencers or these YouTubers, Instagrammers, crypto people, where some people are getting really, really lucky, or there's a real estate deal. And so, we don't want to be investigating everybody who gets lucky. But when you're a public official, I think transparency is important. Especially when you have somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who had so much access to what's going to be going on with pharmaceutical companies or AI chips or et cetera. And I'm not accusing her of anything, but it has been suspected that some of her wealth came from, benefiting from office. And we don't want people to go into the government to get rich. Before you go into a government job for stability. Yeah, but politicians don't have stability because they could have term out, or they could have another election and be voted out. So unfortunately, that could spur that psychological desire, to make or greed to make as much money as you can while you can. The access these Congress people have. And it's interesting too, because I've known people who left and then wanted to get back in. I'm like, why? Aren't you happy? You don't have all the media up your butt. You get to live a private life. No, it's because they had access, and they had ways to make money. They had influence. They would be paid to speak. You make money. Your book sells. And so in Los Angeles, there was a hospice fraud ring, Medi-Cal fraud rings, $267 million. COVID-19 tax credit scheme in LA, $93 million stolen from us. It's not just Minnesota. It's just not Massachusetts. It's not just California. There is so much fraud that's happening. In fact, some of these individuals are illegal immigrants who have fled. And there's the amount of individuals that were able to take advantage of this is, I think the more we find out about it, the more sick to our stomach we're going to get. And as a physician, I was scared to death to do anything that could be accidentally, inadvertently thought of as a wrong decimal. There is just no way. But interestingly, I have been offered job after job after job to sell medical supplies. We need a doctor to prescribe a brace. And I can't tell you how many telemedicine jobs I was, because, when I was, because of radio, it's easy for me to do telemedicine. So when I was looking at telemedicine jobs for years, I keep getting these pitches. We need you to recommend creams and braces. Well, how many people need braces? Are you an orthopedic company? Why aren't you working with orthopedists? Why are you? And then doesn't somebody need to fit the brace in person? And I just wonder how many of these people were fraudsters just trying to find a doctor that would give the go-ahead to write the prescription. Oh, hell no. Luckily, I work for some amazing companies where I see the patient. If I feel the patient needs to seek higher care, I send them to urgent care ER, or they're back to their primary care. If there's a prescription I could provide and treat online, I will. But man, I'm telling you right now, there is so much fraud out there. I wouldn't be surprised how much more they find. 1-877-Doc-Dolly. Don't go away.
Looking for an easy read that can actually help secure someone's future? Pick up a copy of Mark Falter's book, Common Sense Income Strategies. For the past 30-plus years, Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. It's not rocket science, it's a pretty easy read. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. Common Sense Income Strategies is available now on Amazon or by calling 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Common Sense Income Strategies by Financial Fitness Show host Mark Falter. Secure your financial future today.